Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 4 of the Data Breach Playbook Lessons for Every Business Leader. Again, I'm joined with Andrew Brett and Jason Simmons. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking the time to join with me. It's great to have you both here.
Not a problem.
Yeah, pleasure, Liam.
Always, always. All right. So today, in today's episode, we're covering the riveting topic of legal counsel and how exciting law and all of that really is. But no, in the context of a cyber breach, I think this episode there's going to be a lot of great information brought to the surface. Sorry. So as I mentioned, this episode is around legal counsel, and so really, to start us off, I wanted to ask the question from someone who may not know. Again, speaking to the business leaders who are in the trenches every day, doing what they need to do, delivering for their clients. Why is legal counsel important in the context of a data breach?
Yeah, it's a great question, Liam, and it probably doesn't make sense to a lot of people because surely a data breach or a cyber incident is a tech issue and something I need to get my IT person onto or security person onto, and that's correct. You should, but lawyers play a really important role, and I would suggest a central role in responding to incidents because for two main reasons. And one of them is there's this pretty amazing thing that as a lawyer, once we get our lawyer's ticket coming out of university, the courts allow us to apply what's called legal professional privilege over the advice that we give to our clients. And what does that mean? What that means is that when I'm giving advice to an organization, so legal advice, that has what it does, it attaches to communications between me and my client, and it basically says that communication doesn't have is protected from being forced to be produced to another party, and that can include a government regulator, or that could include another party that's involved in your incident, anybody. And we have this saying that lawyers have to take communications to their grave, because when a client actually technically owns that privilege. It's the client's legal professional privilege over the communication between me and them, and they basically own it in a way that means that if the client says to me, when you gave me that advice, when you wrote me that email, when you sent me that letter, that's only between us. Even if a party over here or government regulator says, I want to have a look at that advice, that email, or even investigation report, and we can get into that, they don't get a copy of it if legal or professional privilege is attached. And you can actually defend that right in court. So if another party regulator says, no, there's no privilege here, and you believe there is, you can actually challenge that claim for that document, or the other side can actually demand production of it in court, and that can become a whole other thing. So in essence, when does legal professional privilege attach? It's when a communication is for the dominant purpose of providing legal advice. It can't just be any communication. So if you and I are emailing each other about the latest, footy results on the weekend, or what's happening, what movie do you like? That communication is not for the dominant purpose of me giving you legal advice. That's just a communication between mates. But if you asked for my advice, if your organisation had been breached, and you asked for my advice as to what are the legal obligations my organisation now has regarding this cyber incident, this data breach, and I set that out in an email for you or in a letter, that is seen as a communication for the dominant purpose of providing legal advice, and it's protected. The other situation, and we don't need to go into it today, is that when a communication is for the dominant purpose of litigation, when it's anticipated to occur in the future, and that might be someone suing you, unfortunately, mate, and you need some advice about that, and so we have a communication in relation to that that litigation that might eventuate in the future, and so that's also protected. So that's kind of what LPP, if you want to attach an acronym to it, is.
Which we all in the IT industry love an acronym. We absolutely love our acronyms. I personally don't. I find them infuriating, but for some reason in my industry we love them. So that's great. Good acronym to add to the list. Now I wanted to ask, just off the back of that, just because my mind is curious, if there's an event that's happened for, say, a mutual client, and let's say, Jason, yourself, you're brought in to advise from a legal perspective. I mean, I know you've just defined what that does and doesn't cover. Would that then also potentially extend to conversations with the potential IT service provider, or in the sense that, if we're kind of all in a room together discussing what's going on, does that protection also extend to the client's service provider? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
That
does,
might
and it's
be a bit of a curveball, but just curious.
no, it's a fantastic question. It's one that actually the federal court is grappling with. If not, it'll end up in the High Court with a couple of large data breaches that occurred in 2022. So to answer your question, like most lawyers, unfortunately, will answer this question is it depends.
Of course,
So
of course.
you and that's not kind of like a throw your hands up and let's just see what happens. What I mean by that is if you actually take proper steps to engage a lawyer to advise you in relation to a data breach or cyber incident, then that lawyer engages with a third-party expert, forensic security person to help you with responding to that incident. If I engage with internal IT, external MSP in relation to me providing that advice, those communications also sit within that magic bubble of legal professional privilege.
Gotcha.
Where it gets murky, and this is where the depends comes in, is that if amongst all those communications, and it can get really heated and dramatic and rushed and panicky, if you can start getting a bit loose with your communications, IT's talking separate directly with security, and IT's talking with maybe some internal management people within the organization, and it's kind of all going off in different tangents, the risk then rapidly increases that whatever privilege was attached maybe to communications we were having for the dominant purpose of me giving legal advice, that's no longer attaching.
Yeah.
Or another technical reason why this is a problem is, say if I communicated with you, gave you some advice just in an email, you then forwarded on that to 5 other people, your MSP, the board, someone else in the team that's stressed out about the incident, that can actually waive the privilege that's attached to our communication, and effectively our communication is no longer protected. And so then a third party can come along and go, I want to have a copy of that, and it's no longer confidential to you. So there's some trickiness around this, and what the court is looking at with those big data breaches at the moment is, in those cases, we had fantastic lawyers engaged running the incident. We had great forensic security people helping the organisation out, sophisticated IT teams. But in the end, a report was produced by the forensic company looking at what was the root cause of this incident, what happened a few years prior that might have led to this thing. And the plaintiff suing, the groups of plaintiffs suing those organisations have said, I'm sorry, but this forensic report is not legally privileged. It was actually produced not for the dominant purpose of the law firm providing legal advice to the organisation. It was produced so that the company could just find out what happened, or so it could improve its security going forward, or it could release a media statement. One of them is actually heavily focused on, the CEO wanted to be able to say something in a press release. And so they used, some of that information they obtained from the forensic company for that purpose. And you can start to see there what I was explaining before, where, yes, maybe originally legal professional privilege was great and it was protecting things, but then it started to get a bit murky. And so what I strongly advise my clients is, and this is not an ego thing, a control thing, and it's not to disparage IT or internal management teams. The reason why I like to be in the middle of everything, or one of my lawyers in my team, is so that we can do the best job we can to attach privilege to every communication relating to the incident. If it
100%.
turns out that it doesn't attach to everything for different reasons, so be it. But why not do your best to attach it? Like, it's like, I don't know, I think, Andrew, you and I have talked about, were you a football player? I played rugby at school. And so, I wore headgear. And I remember I was one of those guys who was like, I liked running headfirst into a scrum, into a ruck to try and get the ball back. And I just thought, what's the harm in wearing some headgear just in case I cop a knee or an elbow, and still broke my nose a few times, but it probably prevented a few concussions for me. And while other players would be like, oh, why bother? It's like, well, why not? You never know. I might cop a knock and it might help. And I strongly feel like that with cyber, with data breach response, in that having a lawyer in the center of the response is going to give you the best control you can get over what communications you want the world to see. And I can tell you firsthand that some of the Teams meeting chats that go on between IT people can get pretty loose. And do you really want that to be exposed to the world if you get investigated, or, it goes to court, or something happens? You really want a lawyer to try and protect you as much from that kind of risk or exposure. And then, the obvious reason why I feel like a lawyer should be at the middle of it is, at the end of the day, it's laws that are requiring us to do things in response to incidents. If there was no legislation relevant to any of this stuff, then I guess a company and an IT person can just deal with the relevant compromise and shut off the actor and move on, remediate and move on and uplift some security, and great, happy days. But the Australian government has said no, people impacted by data breaches need to be told. The government needs to be told in certain situations. And when you're dealing with laws, it's best to have lawyers telling you how that works. And so they're, that's kind of, I feel pretty passionate about that, mate, because I feel like sometimes we get a little bit of a bad rap that we get in the way of incident response. And that's not the case. Just like in the football analogy, mate, I didn't step in the back line too often. I was going to get in the way. And so, just like that in an incident response scenario, if the current work stream is not about me and it's about, the IT people and security talking with each other about what's going on, do that, focus on that. Just keep me in the middle of it and tell me the results of what you're doing so that it can be for the dominant purpose of giving you that legal advice.
Well, I was going to say, just jumping in, because I love listening to Jason too. I think it's fascinating. I mean, it's, two things I always see in life is that, especially with law, is, 999 times out of 100 people will say, oh, yeah, I know a bit of law, and they'll say something, and then 999 times the lawyer will go, actually, I could see where you're going with that, but that's not how it works. Everyone's a lawyer, in their head. And the second one is that I think law especially, or lawyers are very good at looking at things like a chess game. If I move the pawn here, four steps down the road, we're going to get taken out by the king. So we need to be very careful. Whereas I don't want to sort of paint everyone with the same brush, but non-legal people are just sort of gung ho and let's go, let's move the pawn, let's move this here, and let's just go and see how it goes. So I think it's a crucial element of these cyber incidents where you can have someone again be in your corner and go, right, this is how we're going to play. I know as he said, a lot of emotions, a lot of stress, a lot of angst, and sometimes people say, I really want to get something. As Jason said. In the previous episode, people go, I want to get something out. I really want to get something out. And it's like, okay, but let's just go through our options first. As I said in my other, and then I'm loving this series because I'm going back to other episodes, as I said about the ambulance reference, it's just a Tuesday for Jason.
Yeah.
It's very calm for him. He's seen so many of them that he's the cool, calm guy in the room, going, right, well, we can do all the stuff he's saying, but let's just go through it together. And I can't stress how much I think. Some people, as you said, Liam, think cyber incidents are just tech, but they're not. There's so many elements to these things.
And I think that, and again, I don't want to generalize, but based on my experience in the industry, and look, I think it's important to also acknowledge that in terms of Australia, and you might agree with this, Jason, you might not, and that's totally fine. But at least from where I'm sitting, we're still very much, cybersecurity and cyber breaches is still very new. Like we sort of said with cyber insurance, right? No one really knows. There's not a known defined approach by a lot of people as to how to handle this, and I don't think overall we've really as a country really grasped how to handle a data breach. It's not just another Tuesday, and obviously having someone like Jason and experienced lawyers who know what to do, that's the way to go. I think from an IT perspective, it's very easy to just approach it like okay, because I think in the realm of IT, right, the logic goes, okay, we have a problem. What do we need to do to solve the problem? Now, problem solution, problem solution, problem solution, problem solution. So when it's we have a data breach, oh, we have a problem. We have an actor. We need to get the actor out. Great, we've got the actor out. Happy days. Let's move on. I think there is a real lack of how does this impact my client, or how does this impact the business itself? Because for me personally, and what you were saying before, Jason, about just being involved in everything, my biggest fear as a service provider is doing something that will jeopardize or compromise my client. Not now, could be a year, could be 2 years, could be 5 years down the track. That's and again, don't want to generalize, but I feel like there's not that awareness across the IT industry at the moment to go, if I jump in here and make this change, what are the potential implications that this will have for the client's business? We don't know what we don't know today. 2 years down the track, something might change, and then all of a sudden there might be a lawsuit or some sort of legal action that, when we were having this breach, no one could even think happens. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, look, and I wish more people were like you, Liam. I think being that risk averse IT support person would be what I prefer, because we actually have a cybersecurity expert within our team now, for the very reason that we want to communicate well with you and with our common client. What should we do and what shouldn't we do right now in response to this incident? And if they're particularly complicated, issues that a lawyer won't understand, we have someone that is able to interpret, what I'm needing to know, what are the priorities from my perspective, and you're able to communicate with somebody, with us, who understands what are you seeing on your side within the network, within their infrastructure, that you really feel quite nervous that I need to do this now, because I feel like otherwise my client could suffer some kind of harm, or their customers could suffer harm. And we understand that desire. And also, taking steps which prevent, say, third-party forensic investigator specialists that will engage to come in and assist us with trying to find out what's going on. They'll need evidence, from you, logs, of course, and different kinds, depending on the environment that you've established for the client. And we don't want to put at risk that those logs won't be available, or the environment's changed or altered in some way, because you're kind of in that, that inexperienced mode of just trying to solve the problem and move forward. And I understand that. And I think that's where maybe a little bit of lack of knowledge of what does incident response look like when you've got the insurer, Andrew, the lawyer, incident response lawyer. What does that look like? We're not getting a call and then we get back to you 2 weeks later. In the meantime, don't do anything. We are on the phone within hours, if not, minutes, kind of thing, to help this organization. And that responsiveness is 101 for us. Like, we have a 24/7 hotline. Like, I am reachable any time of day. We have a team ready to go, and similar services provided by other very capable law firms. And the way insurance companies set up their incident response capability is so that the fear that you have on behalf of your client is front and center for us. Getting them back up and running, getting the evidence we need, and then dealing with the legal requirements. We don't want to be, a barrier to the things that you need to do, just because I'm saying to you, oh, hang on, mate, I need to go draft a pretty email to the client setting out the requirements of the Privacy Act. No. It's much more dynamic than that. We're very agile as a team in terms of being able to deal with things urgently and on the fly. And in 99% of the time, mate, it's dealt with like this. It's
100%.
It's a Teams meeting, where we are throwing it around. What are you seeing? What are you doing? These are the things I need to look at, and we are working through. We're problem solving on the fly.
100%. And for me personally, having that presence in the room is great because, again, like I said, for myself, I don't want to do anything that's going to compromise the client, but just having someone from a legal standpoint be able to say, actually, I probably wouldn't do that, or let's not do that. Let's take this approach instead. I'm like, cool, I'll be guided any which way you want me to go, because I know that the advice that I'm getting is from a legal professional, and that just helps me stay calm.
Look, and can I say too, mate, in more complicated incidents, and there's a lot of them have occurred, unfortunately, where the MSP might need their own lawyers as well. And I've worked on a number of incidents where you've got an MSP has been compromised, and they might have dozens of clients, or even 100 of clients that have been impacted. So the MSP has an incident response, cyber lawyer helping them, and has their interest at heart. So they're investigating what has happened to you and advising them on their obligations. Then the clients also may have their own lawyers. Some of them might be significant clients, large organizations, they might have their own. Or you might actually have situations where 20 or 30 of those clients might actually have a common lawyer, one lawyer that represents all of them. And usually that's coordinated through the cyber insurers, in fact, because the insurer might insure, a large portion of the client pool of that MSP. And I've worked on some incidents with other, great lawyers that I work with all the time, where we're collaborating in a way in terms of, yes, I'm acting for my client's interests first and foremost, providing privileged advice, but I'm also attending Teams meetings and communicating with the lawyers of the other parties impacted, so that we can all get the businesses up and running, get the evidence that we need together. If we've got some sort of ransomware hacker that we've got to deal with, how are we dealing with them? How are we dealing with reporting to the government? Because we don't want to go off all on our merry way, and one client's notifying the OAIC on day 2 and 50 of the other clients haven't done that yet. They're not quite there. And you've got someone else reaching out to ACSC, and ACSC is asking them questions, and you've got other clients over here going, oh no, I told them this. And it's like, it just becomes an absolute, show, if you know what I'm saying. And so that's again where lawyers who are experienced in this stuff understand how to kind of go, all right, fellas, girls, guys, we need to just get together and work out how much of this stuff can we actually coordinate and do together. How can we have our communications with regulators, with customers, with the media be common, be consistent, so that we don't hurt ourselves, hurt our own clients' interests, each other. Because I can tell you from experience, the regulator isn't trying to get like a particular organization or create a particular sort of narrative. The regulator has it in, first and foremost, the Australian public and individuals who have been potentially harmed. And if all the organisations and their lawyers are all coming together and working towards that common goal of communicating with the public and letting them know what's going on and reporting in accordance with the law, they're happy. They're saying happy days to everyone. But if it's not coordinated well and everyone goes off on sort of these different tangents, then I find that the regulators and government agencies start asking questions because they just have to. There's holes in the information they're getting, and they're starting to get a little bit suspicious. Why is one organisation saying, "Oh, there's no personal information impacted. It's a pretty small incident," and then another one saying, "No, it's impacted thousands of people, and we'll keep you updated." And that inconsistency can create real headaches for everyone.
I think that's the big thing too, isn't it, Jason? Like, probably in your experience, tell me if I'm wrong, but when people, as you said, don't have anything in place, they're very hesitant to go look because they're looking at the costs and they're going, "Shit, this could be," we just don't, or they just don't have it. It's not that they're making a decision; they're just going, "We just don't have any money." So, as you said, the IT's fixed the problem, which is in front of them. Problem solved. I've got you back into the system. You guys are good to go. Thank you so much. We're back on trading. All good, and they keep moving. Whereas in the background, as you said, there could be hundreds of thousands of PIIs, personally identifiable information. Now, there you've got the threat actor out, but while he was in, he nicked the TV, he nicked whilst he's not there anymore, he has got all this stuff, and it's almost a case of, well, 6 months down the track, someone else is going to get, or one of those affected parties is going to have a cyber incident and go, it's going to come out that it came out on your network, and like you said, we do empathise that. The economy and the landscape of it is, but unfortunately, it's just the reality of doing business in 2025. So I just think that was an important thing to raise. Is, as you said, sometimes it's like when you were a kid in school. You had a question, but you didn't want to raise your hand because it was embarrassing, so you just didn't ask. And then because you didn't ask, you didn't know. So this gives you the access to ask questions. There's no stupid questions with Jason or whoever your cyber lawyer is. Just really a chance to get yourself educated and go look, and there is cyber insurance claims where it's taken a few sort of weeks to do an investigation, and it sort of hasn't resulted in anything too catastrophic, but those kind of costs has set everyone's mind at ease. They know what's going on, and it sort of it means they looked instead of not looking and working out that it's actually a huge incident. That cool, you got back your business back online and everyone went back to their day jobs, but lingering in the background was this huge incident that no one even saw because they didn't look.
I was going to say, Liam, there's another whole stream of types of cyber incidents that we often don't talk about, and I know this is called the Data Breach Playbook series, but there's a lot of invoice payment frauds going on right now conducted by cyber criminals where organisations reach out to us asking for advice as to what do we do when we've paid $100,000 to a cyber criminal, looks like to a cyber criminal, because they've just been socially engineered as a result of the compromise of their network or the network of a customer or client, and now they're out of pocket $100,000 because now they still need to pay that money, that debt to client or third-party service provider, and they don't know what to do. And that is absolutely a legal problem because I can tell you 10 times out of 10, the organisation that issued that invoice initially, they will come after you for the 100K. And only someone who's dealing with the relevant legal issues in this space will understand how to advise you, because it can get nasty quick because you're $100,000 out of pocket. Now you get a claim against you for $100,000, and that client is fully entitled to enforce that invoice or enforce that contract. That is contract law 101. It doesn't change just because we're dealing with a cyber incident. What, though, does change is the circumstances around why did that organisation get fooled into sending money to a cyber criminal instead of paying the invoice properly. And the investigation that's required to find out what's going on is just like a normal cyber incident. And then once you find out as much as you can about what was the underlying cause of this thing, then the parties have got to work out, well, how are we going to distribute the loss here across the parties, that $100,000 loss? And there's been a few minor judgments that have come out, one earlier this year, a couple the year before,
Yeah.
which have given us
Yep.
some guidance. But the courts haven't dealt with it in real detail, and definitely, and not a superior court like a Supreme Court or federal court yet.
Mm.
And so you've got a situation where if you get good advice, you can deal with that situation better than maybe you realise if you're trying to just deal with it on your own.
Yeah. Well, there. I think recently there was that case. I don't quote me on the details. I think it was in Perth or WA. There was an issue with that exact example, and I think again, I'm getting the terms wrong, but the people who paid the fraudulent invoice, I think, were told that they still had to pay their supplier. I think, was that right? I could be completely wrong.
And that's the correct starting point. I say to every client, if they come to me and they tell me that they've paid money out, and I ask them, so what does the payment relate to? And they're like, oh, it's an invoice or it's a contract. And they say, okay, well, I like to be pretty upfront about these type of cases, because the last thing I want to do is make them feel like I'm going to get them out of this payment no matter what. I'm going to say, look, that payment's going to be payable on its face. That invoice, that debt. However, I do say that there is legal principles that we can lean on to push responsibility of that debt on other parties. How we do that is complicated.
Yeah, the cyber insurance. Sorry, Jason. There's also the cyber insurance policy element. Not only, and I will stress this because I think this is very important, it's not even just we have a cyber insurance policy that's covered, because I wish I had $1 for every time I've seen a policy that has a big top mark, says $3 million aggregate limit, and you get to page 4 and it says social engineering fraud sublimit $25,000. And you're going, client, I get it. They've listened to their broker and they've gone, we have $3 million for cyber insurance, Jason. He goes, I'm really sorry, but this $100,000 invoice, yeah, we can get 25, but you're still in the can for 75. So I really want to stress that it's not just these are the covers. Actually, it's ironic. These are the covers I talk about in a lot of my content, saying cyber insurance is built very different. There is almost 35 providers in Australia. Some of them will offer you, just like the car dealership, they'll advertise the top of the range model, and then all of a sudden you go to buy it and they go, oh, that's actually not the model you've bought. You bought the base model. You had to add on all the extras. And unfortunately, and I'll take the heat in my industry. The skill set is there's not many that know what the policy looks like and what there is. So there is that case where these insurances can cover it. We constantly look at those sort of risks and get the amount of money that would be there. We do ask them, what's the invoices you pay? What are common invoices? What are the risk exposures of your exact company? And because it's too many times do we see Jason's nailed it where they go, oh, we got cyber insurance. Yeah, actually. But also the fact that, just to repeat what he said, they're so worried about they're over here. And Jason's like, actually, we need to discuss about this invoice because you've probably got, whatever the credit terms are, we've got that before we're going to start getting emails saying, well, pay out.
Yeah. And if I could jump in here.
Yeah, jump in.
I just wanted to share really quickly because this is so topical. From an IT perspective, switching back over to the IT perspective, I actually, when I was very fresh and young in my career several years ago, I remember dealing with a call from a small home builder here in Victoria, who refused to put email spam filtering in. They didn't see the so it was like $2 a month per user. They had 5 users. It was like $10, right? Or not $10. Don't quote me on my maths. They called in, and I remember a month before the account manager who was looking after their account saying, "Hey, really, we recommend spam filtering." No, we don't want to spend any money. We don't want to spend any money. Then a month later, I get the call from the financial controller. Hey, we just had a supplier call us and say that we haven't paid their invoice, but we paid their invoice. Is there any possibility that something's happened? And I'm like, well, okay, well, I also went to some more senior guys than me because I was still quite fresh. And basically the response was call the bank, have the bank look and see where it's gone, speak to the supplier, look at the ABN details. Long story short, they ended up transferring about $120,000 to another party. Now, this is the other thing. They transferred that and then called us 3 weeks later, and then we said, go speak to your bank. So by the time the bank got involved, the bank was like, money's gone offshore. There's nothing we can do. And what was really sad about that entire situation, there's a lot of learnings from that. They didn't have cyber insurance. They didn't even have email spam filtering. But the saddest part about that was that company went under about 8 months later. They just shut their doors. They went into administration. Because I don't know what happened in the background. I don't know if there was potential legal. Probably there was a legal conversation going on from the suppliers and saying, "Hey, like that's sad that you transferred 100 grand to that cyber criminal, but you still owe me 100 grand for materials for houses that you built." And obviously in the building industry,
and they don't make the
invoices.
media. These
No.
are stories that no one ever hears about. They just disappear, those companies, and we won't go into it, but there's the other thing. You lose 120, you have to repay the 120, and all of a sudden you realize you're trading insolvent, and then you've got to, it's not even your decision. You've just got to hand it over, and unfortunately, like I said, these happen every day, but you're never going to hear about them.
No, it's a great point, mate. And I'll be the glass half full guy here. I've got a couple of good news stories. Very recent matters. Great cyber insurer where we got engaged to assist with the incident response. They'd suffered a social engineering fraud, and as we worked through dealing with the incident, live hack, potential data breach requiring notification, we got instructions from the insurer simultaneously, because they had SEF cover. So Andrew, they had a lot more than 25 grand, which was fantastic. Covered in full the payment that they'd made. The insurer had reimbursed them for that payment, so made them whole for that, and then paid them for my expense, the forensic investigator's expense for dealing with the incident. So they didn't have to wait even for it all to kind of get resolved months later. And the data breach, an incident response is still going out. We've got a few little things to deal with, but they've actually received the cash already. And so dealing with like any kind of insolvency risk or, bad debt risk and you name it, the insurer actually steps up, because the way insurance works, and I definitely don't want to bring this in at 37 or so minutes into the pod, but
that's right.
the way an insurance policy actually works, and the way it was taught to me by a much smarter senior counsel than me, was that insurance and the way insurance clauses are structured in a policy, they each act on their own. You come in the door of each insuring clause, and so if you want cover for your social engineering fraud, you knock on that door, get that cover out of the insurer for that. If you want your incident response costs covered, you knock on that door, and they can work completely separately to each other, because the way the policy works is the insurer looks at whether the insurance is triggered through each of those insurance clauses individually. And I think a lot of people don't understand the magic of cyber insurance in those situations. It's a fantastic thing when I can say to a client, here's your check for 100 grand, and my privacy advice is coming shortly that those costs are covered. So yeah, it's pretty good.
That's great to contrast a negative story versus a positive story. And I think, again, from a business owner's perspective, 10, 15, 20 grand cyber insurance policy to make sure that your $120,000 invoice that you still owe to a supplier gets paid. And like you said, Jason, your forensics are taken care of. Like the cost for yourself, Jason, is taken care of. All of that.
I just think, sorry to jab you on that, because I don't want people going away from the podcast saying, "Oh, what 15, 20 grand? What do you mean?"
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, I just got to stop you there. I've got clients who have paid me $2,500 total premium, including GST and stamp duty. They've got in the six figures of social engineering fraud cover. So it's not, as you said, it's even more benefit. They will be assisted, and as Jason said, and it's true, most reputable policies, can't talk for all of them, but we'll have section A, section B, section C, section D, and he's right. You can come in at each section and say, right, well, we need to transact this payment here because I need the client And as Jason has said, and we've both said from the insurance side, the whole point of a claim is to get the client back to where they were as fast as we possibly can. And so, there's no point holding things up, and the client hasn't, we're about to lose something anyway. It's just, when can we get this paid? How quick can we get it done? It might not be the whole claim, but I'll give you a part payment and I'll keep you moving along.
Yeah, that's wow, that's great. And there was a few things mentioned along the way. I'd love to just go back really quickly. I was busy scribbling notes as we were going through. There was as we were chatting, Jason, the one thing that I would love to be able to help educate business leaders on is the topic around cyber law and specialist cyber law firms versus potentially your stock standard commercial lawyer whose specialty is contracts. Now, commercial lawyers absolutely needed in their own right, but going back to the conversation of good advice, I reflect on this podcast episode so far, and I think it really sort of highlights why you need a specialist cyber lawyer in the room. I would love your take on how can business owners look at what support they have from a law perspective and understand, can my current law coverage or my relationships, will that cover me, or do I need to potentially find someone who could be a little bit more specialist, or even, hey, I've got a cyber insurance policy, let me pick up the phone to my broker and kind of get an intro to who's looking after me. If you've got any comments around that, I'd love to know.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I would say I never want to be disparage lawyers who cover a number of areas, particularly, I live on the Central Coast. And so most lawyers on the Central Coast don't specialize in like something so niche as cyber law. And I would encourage organizations, if this is completely new to you, that there's like, oh my gosh, I've got to comply with cyber law, what does that mean? Of course, go to the person that you trust and that you might use for your commercial dealings or your property transactions, or heaven forbid, a family or criminal matter you've had to deal with. But I would hope that in 2025, the network across the legal fraternity, and I do a lot of this with other lawyers, that lawyer knows someone who really does this stuff day to day, day in, day out. Or they know how to find someone who does this day in and day out, because, well, quite frankly, it's a risk for them to be giving advice that they don't specialize in. That's not good news for their PI insurance. But I would think we are now getting into a world where the law is so complicated, incidents have to be dealt with so rapidly that you can't dabble in this. You can't dabble in cyber law. I say that very confidently this day and age. And I do feel like too, there is enough good lawyers out there that you should be able to find one that has capacity to take on your work. And definitely across the cyber insurance market, you've got panels, including law firms, who are very capable to assist organizations of all sizes with data breaches and cyber incidents. And so, yeah, absolutely call your broker, ask for the name and contact details of the law firm that's on the panel. And if you want to have a pre-incident meeting, most insurers are able to, set that up for you. And absolutely, otherwise, mate, they can drop me a message on LinkedIn.
I was about to say, I'm like, if you don't have a good cyber lawyer, there's one in the room right now who seems very knowledgeable and is a very nice guy. So you could definitely reach out. No, that's awesome. Yep. That's great. Well, yeah, look, I think we have got a little bit over time in this episode, which is totally fine. I think the amount of knowledge and information in this episode alone is the entire reason why we're doing this. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Jason and Andrew, for the conversation and the knowledge. This has been fantastic. Any closing thoughts from either of you before we close it out?
No, I think we've had 45 minutes of incredible conversation.
Yeah, great.
I'm not shocked this went over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
The lawyer was talking. That's why we went over time.
No, the one myth that while we were talking there, I was like, I want to present this as a myth, and you're probably going to cringe at this, Jason. But when you were talking there about dealing with other law firms, and especially when the MSP's got a law firm and the client might have a law firm, there was a point where I was grinning because I wanted to chime in and be like, what? So you don't do like Suits where you walk in, you slap down a binder, the client gets pissed, and then you walk out and feel like an absolute boss? So that would be my closing thought or
That's
myth to bust.
that's exactly what it's like. I have a stack of manila folders just ready to go right here with all just to lay on all the desks of
Oh,
my opponents. Absolutely.
that's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for this episode. It's been a really insightful episode. Tune in for episode potentially 4 or 5, where we will continue the discussion in the legal realm, but we'll be pivoting over to regulation and litigation, which will be another cracker episode because, again, for me personally, this is not something that I'm super well across. So I really look forward to the conversations that will come from that conversation. So yes, please join us next week. For now, we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.